Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. All Things Middle-earth here with a very requested video, and that is how to counter this monstrosity of a commander that I have here, the Witch King. If you've played this game at all and come across this character, you have more than likely been on the receiving end of some very ferocious slaps by this guy, and it really is just no fun to go up against him if you don't know what you're doing. So today we're going to talk about why the Witch King is such a good commander, and we're going to cover 5 commanders that are very good counter options, hard counter options for him, as well as some kind of other honorable mention and soft counter type of commanders, or even items that will just make commanders who would normally stand no chance at least not get obliterated as much. Because truthfully, I think just not getting obliterated and having the Witch King run through 6 armies is kind of a win. So we're going to cover all those options, so stay tuned, and that's coming up in just 1 second. Okay, so as with any battle preparation tactics, before you can really defeat your enemy, you need to understand how they work. If you don't understand how they work, you're going to have a hard time putting together a counter. And so it's important to know how these things work. So there's just a few things we're going to point out here. This is not a Witch King review video, but the 2 major things I want to bring your attention to are going to be the convener skill here, which is in the first 2 rounds, all allied units are going to gain initiative and a 75% chance to gain follow-up, which means they're going to attack 2 times in that round, and they're also, with initiative, going to act first. So that is number 1, the biggest reason that Witch King is a problem. Not to mention the 30% extra damage from Orcs, Uruk-hai, Evilmen, and Trolls is pretty nasty with the extra HP there. You also have Morgul Commander to reduce damage that the Orcs and Uruk-hai receive. So that's the priority 1 for his skill, his build here. And then next you have Ring Wraith, and Ring Wraith with Black Captain and Convener is where this build really comes together, because all enemies are going to receive extra burn, poison, and focus damage by 30%, and an additional 15 focus there. And then we have Nazgul Screech, which is on a round 1 against 2 targets. There's going to be a 100% chance of inflicting stun. And so the way the Witch King works is basically he beats you in the first 2 rounds, which is crazy. And so the name of the game is surviving the first 2 rounds so that you can actually, play through the rest of the battle and stand a chance of not getting wiped out. Because again, this guy is nuts, and I've used him in both my seasons here to massive effect, seriously wiping out like 10 armies at one time sometimes of high-level commanders. If they're not prepared, if they're not good counters, it gets nasty. So the idea here with Witch King is you're going to run Alchemists with him, because the Alchemists deal a lot of fire damage, and so you're going to get the extra burn damage. You're going to use the Alchemists who do burn damage. They deal extra with this. They get to go twice. They get more damage with this. It is just the absolute nukiest, I think, commander in the entire game. So that is the Witch King. That is a very short summary of how he works and why he works. These are the skills that ideally you'd run with him. You have to have him at Respect 3 to really pull this off. And then again, like I said, you're going to be running Alchemists, and then any other combination. I see a lot of different stuff with sometimes Trolls in there as a kind of tanky unit. Again, it seems like Alchemists are really the one true, addition to that team. Everything else can kind of vary. One other variation of the Witch King that I wanted to cover is a Witch King that has any accessory with Tactical Mark. The big thing with Tactical Mark here is that he's going to gain Pursuit and ignore Evasion. And I'm going to explain when we get to the counters talking about this, that with this item, or any item, this is the Palantir of Orthanc can have it, the Orthanc's Devilry. I think there's even several other ones that can have this. I believe the gold version of the drums can have it as well. So that's something that I wanted to make sure I pointed out, because we are going to talk about an alternative counter against this. But the Tactical Mark, that's something that you'll want to make sure. Obviously, you're not going to know before you get hit by a Witch King or you hit a Witch King. But if you do know which Witch King you're going up against, and if they do run an item with Pursuit, there's going to be a different build to run with it. But that's kind of the other variation of the Witch King. It's just standard, normal burn dealing, whatever, and then throwing in, if you get Tactical Mark, that can make things even more difficult. But that's the Witch King. So now let's go ahead and dive into the counters for him. So before we get into the counters, the 5 different commanders we're going to talk about, I wanted to show you the spreadsheet that I'm going to be referencing. I decided to go ahead and put together a spreadsheet and a little tab for each of the different commanders we're talking about. That way I could just really clearly lay out what the different builds are. So for the first commander we're going to talk about is Gandalf the Grey. It shouldn't be a spoiler if you've looked at this stuff at all. But just a really quick summary of what skills you're going to use, where you're going to want to allocate points, ideal gear, the troop compositions, And then if there are any weaknesses or alternative type of builds or things like that, we're going to look at. So these are just going to be laid out very clearly. So this is going to be linked down below in the description. So if you want to look at this and look at any specific commander and see which one maybe you can get the best counters with, because you may not have all 5 of these available. You might just have one of them. And so you can try and make that one work by looking through what the different kind of requirements are for those. So again, this is linked down below, and this is also going to be updated pretty much as I can. So if there's another commander we talk about, again, as you can see down here, we've got these 5 commanders. We might add more commanders down the road. There might be something that changes, or as more people get in on this conversation, we might find out some different, better things about some of these commanders. And so that will change along with this. So this is going to ideally be updated as much as possible. So it should be a good resource to reference, hopefully for a long time. So this will be down below. Feel free to share it, screenshot it, look at it. You can even make a copy yourself. If you go into the file page, you can make your own copy and edit things yourself if you want to. Whatever you want to do, it's free game. So this is what I'm going to be referencing during the video, and I'll try and put it up on screen if I'm kind of talking about it a lot. But this is going to be, I think, a helpful resource for you to look at as we talk about these counters. And one last side note before I get started on going through, we're going to start with Gandalf the Grey here. Seriously, huge thank you to everyone in the Discord. I 100% could not have put together any of this stuff without them. I got so much good information. I was actually able to test out a lot of these on my own account and just see firsthand the success we had here. So I'm going to show you battle reports. I'm going to show you skills. We're just going to go through everything. But I genuinely had a great time going through this. So seriously, huge shout out to everyone who's been helping out in the Discord. And if you're not in the Discord already, joining these conversations with us, that's linked down below. We're having a good time just talking about how these commanders work and who does what best. So feel free to join us over there. But all of that out of the way, we're going to talk about Gandalf the Grey first, who is one of my favorite counters for the Witch King because he's a tier 2 commander. There are going to be some options tier 1, 2, and 3. I feel like Gandalf sits in that sweet spot where he's really, really good. He's a great commander. He has a lot of other uses outside of just being a counter for the Witch King. But he also at tier 2 and respect 5 can do a very good job countering the Witch King. So here is going to be the ideal build for him, which again is going to be on the spreadsheet, which is what I'm referencing. You're going to be maxing out the Mithrandir tier with Convener and Free Peoples maxed out if possible. I did not have enough points to finish Free Peoples, so that's the one that I'm still working on. So that's where I took the 2 points out of there that I was missing. Then you're going to do 2 points into the Gray, 1 point into Blindside, 1 point into Wizard, and then you're going to max out White Council, High Alert, and Champion of the Light. So again, the ideal build here would be to max out Free Peoples as well. And if you've got to respect something ridiculous, Gandalf, you can continue to go into, probably I would assume into the Gray and more into Blindside. It does at this point. This does fantastic. So there's no need to. But if you've got a crazy Gandalf, just continue with the skills you've already started in on that. But these are the skills you're going to run for countering against the Witch King. Now, in terms of the items you want to have on Gandalf, there's nothing that's really super strict. There's not like a maxed out gold item. That's the nice thing about a lot of these counters is they don't really require crazy gear. We are going to talk about some gear that's really helpful. But for Gandalf, I was running the Carver on him for the extra attack, mostly just for the focus for Gandalf the Grey, because that basically helps all of his skills, and then the attack for the men. Smite's great on it, but we're not really worrying about Gandalf dealing a ridiculous amount of damage, although he can do some pretty good damage. But I ran the Carver here, and that worked fantastically. Next up, I believe I had the Quilted Armor on him. Again, I'm switching between Gandalf the White and Gray, so that's why Gandalf the White has it right now. But again, just any armor that's focusing on focus, and then I also had Attunement on here, which gave me some extra focus, so that was fantastic. For the headpiece, I had the Bone Mask, so lots of focus, HP, and then Hysteria. Hysteria, which inflicts madness, is a perk that we're going to talk about as one of those things that any commander, even if they're not mentioned as a counter, that runs madness or stun, depending on the build of the Witch King you're going up against, madness and stun can really help to increase your chances to have a good battle against Witch King. But I had this Bone Mask with Hysteria here. And then lastly, for the accessory, I think what I would probably guess as the best accessory for him would be the Wizard's Fireworks with Mend. So I think I ran the Worn Out Smoking Pipe because I had the focus there and sustain. This is what I had strengthened up. But you do get good focus from the Wizard's Fireworks as well. There is a healing effect on this, and you get army attack for your ranged troops. So the build that you're going to run, I'm going to show you in a second, it's going to be pretty nice to just have your troops doing a little bit more damage. So again, whatever you have is going to be fine. That this worn out smoking pipe is what I ran, and that worked fantastic for me. So those are the items that I used for Gandalf the Grey. And finally, we get to the good part. We get to the battle report for Gandalf. Now, this is going to be the troop comp that you're going to run. You're going to run a combination of sharpshooters, sentinels, and cataphracts. I had the percentages in the sheet for my Gandalf where he's at level 45. And take note, this is a level 45 Gandalf going against a level 50 Witch King here. So I thought that was a pretty good indicator as well of how this is going to go. I ran about 35 command worth of sharpshooters, 12 command of sentinels, and then like 22, 23 command of the cataphract. But I have those percentages in this sheet so you can kind of try and emulate this as much as possible. The sentinels and the sharpshooter numbers can switch depending on the items you have. I have the attack for men, so the sharpshooters benefit from that. So they're getting the attack there, as well as the ranged attack from the Wizard's Fire. We talked about if you have that as well, so they can end up doing some pretty good damage, and their ability with the range advantage I thought was pretty nice. So this is the build that we run, and as you see here, shout out to Vizio for letting me attack his Witch King over and over and over again. This is a Witch King that is running, this does have Tactical Mark, which didn't affect Gandalf the Grey here, but this is a stun, a Witch King that has the Horseman Helm that is completely immune to stun in the first 2 rounds. This is one of the more tough Witch Kings you're going to come up against. And first battle here that we had, as you can see, not only did Gandalf the Grey actually win this battle in terms of this, I mean, again, if you just don't get your butt kicked, it's a win for Gandalf the Grey. And he was the one out here almost one-hitting the Witch King here. So this was fantastic. We have another one here. Again, the results varied a little bit. I do think there was a troop change here. So it looks like he subbed out the snipers there for some of the dragoons maybe. So slight shift here, but nothing crazy. This one, again, with the Horseman's Helm. But again, you still see Gandalf taking the win here. And then lastly, I believe we did 3, maybe even one more of them. This one was probably the most even one we had. And we did run this one with a different, this is a full helm with Inspire. So surprisingly enough, the time that the Witch King did not have stun immunity, it seemed like Gandalf did, just not the worst, but this is like the closest one we have. So obviously there are some different effects of what things hit and RNG, and we've kind of looked at the battle reports on those to see what happens. But as you can see, 3 in a row, if you are running this Gandalf and come across your Witch King, you're not going to get wiped out. This is going to do fantastic for you. And Gandalf is a character that I think pretty much everyone playing the good side should have. So get your Gandalf. If you can get him to Respect 5 as soon as possible, you're going to have the ability to really do a good job against these Witch Kings here. So that is our first and one of my favorite Witch King counters, Gandalf the Grey. One last thing on the Gandalf build, I almost forgot. I did include this on the sheet as well, but some of the weaknesses pointed out by in the Discord server were that this Gandalf build that we're running is very weak against Khaldun builds and Sauron builds. So just be aware of that. You kind of need to be prepared. Obviously, you're not always going to know what's coming up, but some of these builds are hard countered by other builds. That's just how the game works. But Khaldun, if there is a Khaldun running around, because Gandalf, a lot of his abilities do not have anything to do with evil men, Khaldun kind of slaps this Gandalf around. So just something to note as well on the spreadsheet. Feel free to check that out. Another commander I wanted to talk about in this video is Dwalin, and for that matter, any Dwarven commanders that share this Warrior of the Lonely Mountain ability. So I think that's Balin and Ori, and who knows what other dwarves we're going to get down the road. I think this ability is a good step in the right direction to being at least maybe a soft Witch King counter. But I wanted to include Dwalin in this conversation because he is a tier 1 commander, and we got a lot of good reports sent into our Discord with some very good success against the Witch King with Dwalin. But there are a few very specific things that need to happen to make this work. I'll show you some testing that I did. Again, bear in mind my Dwalin is about 5 or 6 levels below the max level, so there's a little bit less point allocation that could play a little bit of difference, but I think it's going to come down to troop composition and items that you have for this commander. So starting out for me, I just used the tankiest troops that I have, which was usually Guardians, or sometimes I tried some Cataphracts. And again, as you can see, for all 3 of these, they were all defeats. I think the Cataphracts did the best, taking out maybe about a third here. But again, it was a defeat every time for him. Running this build, I tried a couple different variations with the points, where I, instead of going into Longbeard and Giant Slayer and the R5 tree, I went into the Experienced Warrior. So I think this is very close to what the build would be, and we saw some success with this sent in the Discord. The difference for me, what I was able to test was just the different troop availability. There was some great success with Eagles, and I believe in that build he did have a chest piece with a little bit of fire resistance, not a crazy amount. I think it might have been at 20%. Oh, so not a crazy amount there, but he was running the Eagles with that to get that success. And then there's also another option for Dwalin, and this is where he's going to have a full helm with the blinding light ability. So let me pull this up so you can see it. Here is the blinding barrier ability. It is going to be for knights, the tier 2 cavalry. They are going to have focus, burn, and poison damage reduced by 60%. So there is also a variation of Dwalin with the blinding barrier, with knights, with warrior of the lonely mountain, where you can run a full army of knights and really do a good job against Witch King and other really burn heavy commanders. So again, there's been some great success with the full helmet there, and I do think if you had some other items that are going to have burn damage, I believe the Elven Cloak has some reduction, maxed out. Looks like resistance here is up to 30%. There's also a purple one that I think can get up to 50 or 60% as well on that. But I did not have those pieces for my Dwalin. I was not, so I wasn't able to test the ideal item build, nor really the ideal troop build. But I wanted to include Dwalin in the conversation, and as you've seen on the screen, I'm putting up some reports that were impressive, and other commanders may have even done even worse than this against the Witch King, and where we got a level difference here of 5 levels. But as you'll see in the video, some other commanders, even with level difference, were able to still put up some better numbers. But I think Dwalin being a tier 1 commander is someone we should be talking about, because him and Ori at the tier 1 with that R5 ability, with just maybe one item, even if it's a purple item that's required there, that could really make these tier 1 commanders a lot more viable with that. So I wanted to just put this in here. This is not something I'm necessarily sold on, at least with the troops that I had and the items I had. I don't have access to Eagles. So again, if you've had some better luck with Dwalin with some other circumstances, maybe where you didn't need specific items or specific troops, let me know in the comments below. But it does seem like you're going to need a little bit more with his R5 skill to make this work. But again, that's just kind of the name of the game. And even still, some of these reports weren't horrible. Even with some anti-cav here, taking out a third of the Witch King's army, to me, was still close to that. Again, like I said in the beginning of the video, sometimes the name of the game is not necessarily winning, but it's more just not getting 6 armies crushed, because that really sets you back if you get 6 armies knocked out by the Witch King. So again, that's going to be Dwalin. The spreadsheet will continue to be updated. So if we figure out more things about Dwalin, or I'm able to do more testing, the spreadsheet will be updated. So that's down below. And I may even at some point do an update video on this one where I show some different counters with even other Dwarven units. And again, these counters we're talking about in this video aren't the only ones in the game either. So we may end up doing a part 2 where I get some better luck with Dwalin. But running this setup, I didn't have the best luck. But as you can see, we do have some screenshot proof of some very good counters, just not something I was able to replicate with my situations in my server. So keep all that in mind, but that's Dwalin. So now on to the next commander. All right, the next counter we're going to talk about is going to be Gil-galad. Now, Gil-galad's one of the only commander, actually the only commander we've been talking about in this Discord that I do not have access to yet, but I really want to unlock this guy because he is fantastic. So even at Respect 1, his Kingly Kin ability is going to 4 elves in the first 2 rounds, give them a chance to avoid all damage. So again, if you remember talking about Witch King in his build, he does a lot of damage if you have the Alchemist attacking twice in the first 2 rounds. So avoiding all of that really levels the playing field. So you start out with the Kingly Kin ability here. Then you've got abilities like Well Prepared, which is a counterattack ability. So either using certain units that counterattack or using this ability is very fantastic, because even if the Alchemists miss on, if you evade, they can still get counterattacked. That's very nice. And then we have the Exorbitance here for just extra damage for the allies. So that's the fantastic, kind of first option there. And then if you had your choice of it and you were not going up against a Witch King with Tactical Mark, you're going to go into, I think, White Council, followed up by High Alert and Champion of the Light. Again, this is something that Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White have as well. And so just going to continue to reduce the damage that you're receiving. So it really makes that counter a lot better for Gil-galad. So you're going to run the R1 and the R3 tree there. Again, those are on the spreadsheet. Now, what I talked about with the Witch King, if he is running any item with Tactical Mark, which is going to basically ruin Kingly Kin, because this evade is not going to happen. He's going to see right through it, and it just makes this a waste. So Gil-galad still has a fantastic build that can be used without Kingly Kin. It does require the R5, but in my mind, it's pretty amazing that this guy literally has Witch King counters at R1, And then even with a Witch King with a specific item that counters it, he's going to still have a counter, which again, that's on the sheet, but you're primarily going to skip Kingly Ken and do everything else. You're going to go into High King, and you're going to be running a lot of elves, so they're going to have damage reduction here, extra HP. Elven Leader, I think this maxes out at 20%. They're going to get a chance to follow up and do 2 normal attacks every round. Then you're going to still go into White Council. And then lastly, you can put extra points into Icicle. I don't think it's insane because it stuns the, you have a commander stun, which isn't great for Witch King. But basically, just putting your points into White Council, High Alert, Champion of the Light, High King, and Elven Leader. If you do those 5 skills, you can still go up very, very well against Witch Kings. Again, I'll put some reports up on the screen. But as you can see, even if you're not running Kingly Ken, you're not evading all that damage early round. Again, just with the combination of White Council and High King, Gil-galad does a fantastic, fantastic job. And lastly, for Gil-galad, again, in terms of items, this is on the sheet as well. There's no specific items required here either. Again, if you have any anti-burn type stuff, that's just going to help even more. But basically, you just want to boost any of the troops that Gil-galad is using. So we're running a bunch of elves. So anything that boosts what the elves are doing and anti-burn there. And then in terms of the troop, I kind of saw a few different variations. But basically, you're going to run the Heralds because they have a counterattack ability. So they're going to counterattack and deal damage back to the Alchemists. And I saw anywhere from 1/3 of the army comp to an entire half of the army comp of Heralds. And then the rest is split up between Bow Knights and Sentinels here. And you can also use any Elven Tier 4 troops you have access to in place of the Sentinels. So again, you want to bring in 3 different troop types. Heavy on the Heralds, a little bit of Bow Knights in there, and then Sentinels. So you run all Tier 3 troops there. But if you do have a Tier 4 available, like the March Warden, you can throw that in instead of the Sentinel and do very, very good. And again, like we talked about, we do have the weakness here of pursuit items that kind of breaks the Kingly Ken hard counter. But Gil-galad, as you can see, even without that, it still has an alternative build that also wrecks the Witch King. So that's a fantastic option there. Next up for our Witch King counters is going to be a Tier 2 Evil Commander. So even if you're playing as evil, you've got some good options because, again, just because you're playing as evil and maybe even have your own Witch King does not mean you're not going to come across other Witch Kings. So we do have an evil counter here with the Mouth of Sauron. This is a commander I do have. I have not been able to do some testing with him specifically yet either. But some crazy, crazy reports for this guy. Again, as you can see by the reports that are on the screen, that this guy can absolutely decimate the Witch King. The build here that we're going to run is going to be 2 points into Black Numenorian with then 1 point into Black Art. So we're going to do the 2 points there, 1 point there. Then we're going to max out the Harbinger of Darkness and Enfeeble. And we're also going to put 1 point into Master of Mischief, which is going to trigger our possible Madness Infliction there. And then lastly, you're going to go into the Lieutenant of Barad-dûr here with the Orc and Troll extra damage, as well as the Orcish Warlord and the Dishearten ability there for him. Now, the troop comp for the Mouth of Sauron is pretty specific. So you're going to run 45 command of Reapers, 15 command of Crushers, and 15 command of Raiders. It sounds like, from what we heard, the Reapers and the Crushers are the most essential because they are going to target Alchemists. The Raiders, I think, can be optional. And when I say 45 command, 15 to 15, that is assuming a level 50 Mouth of Sauron. So you can do the math there. If you don't have yours quite there, just kind of get within those ranges. But again, basically, you're running 3 times more Reapers than everything else. So whatever you have yours at, you can do that. But you run the Reapers. Now, this does sometimes depend on the army comp you're going up against. But the culling ability here on the Reapers is going to prioritize the enemies with the lowest defense, which is almost always going to be the Alchemist. So that's why you bring in so many of these guys. And then the Crusher can also sometimes target the Alchemist too. It's going to prioritize enemies with the lowest attack. So again, especially getting this upgraded, just dealing extra damage and having that priority so you take out the Alchemist as soon as possible. And then again, lastly, the suggestion here was the Raider, which is going to be fine. I think you could go really with anything. You could probably do the Dragoon as well. It just kind of depends on the build you're going up against. But the Reapers and Crushers are going to be the MVP here for the Mouth of Sauron. Now, in terms of gear, there's only one item that you really want to see here that's going to make this build a lot better. And that is going to be a Superior Hauberk, but not the one with Shroud here that I have. It is going to be the one with the Fire Protection. So as you see here, the Fire Protection is going to reduce burn damage received by 60%, On his own, I do think Mouth Sauron with this Orc build is going to be a solid counter to the Witch King. But again, these counters really come alive and actually like just, I mean, the Witch King basically gets slapped by this guy, especially with the burn damage here. So if you have this item here, everything else you just want to focus on might, so your troops do more damage, or focus on damage for orcs. There's nothing else that's really required for this. But ideally, this fire protection here on him is going to really allow that counter to go pretty nuts. And last but not least, a counter that I am very excited about, probably the most excited about, because I think it is the most thematic counter, because there is an epic showdown in the Return of the King. If you haven't seen it, you got to stop watching this video right now. Go watch that. But it's Witch King versus Gandalf the White. It is just as good as it gets. But Gandalf the White can be a fantastic counter for the Witch King. And now, obviously, being a tier 3 commander, requiring R5 is a pretty pricey one, so it's not going to be for everyone. But this is one of the tier 3 commanders that I had, and it took a little bit of tweaking. I'll show you the report so you can see what the kind of difference was here. But this is the build you're going to run. You're going to run 2 points into Wizard with 1 point into Surge, 2 points into the White with 1 point into Blindside, and then you're going to max out the R3 White Council tree. You got the burn damage reduction right here with Championing the Light, dealing extra damage. And then White Rider, followed by Horsemanship. And if you have extra points, my Gandalf is not level 50, you're going to go into Reinforcement, but I just didn't have enough to put any points into there. So I'm missing that skill from the optimal build, and still had crazy results at level 46. Again, some of these counters, like my Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White, performed so well against a level 50 Witch King. So these are the items that I ran on my Gandalf. Again, these are basically the ones I use on both my Gandalf the Grey and my Gandalf the White. They're not ridiculous, but if you're free to play, even fully strengthened and refined purple gear is going to be hard to come by. But it's still, a lot. I don't have like crazy gold gear or anything on him. But I ran that same Carver with the attack for men with Smite on there. I've got the Quilted Armor that has the extra focus here. Got the Bone Mask with Hysteria, so we're getting Madness going, and then the Worn Out Smoking Pipe with Sustain. That's what I ran here, getting his focus up to 413. The troop comps that you're going to run with Gandalf the White is going to be as follows. Just even thirds of all the tier 3 mounted troops. So Cataphract, Cavalier, and the Bow Knights. This is the setup. I did see some different variations of this, looking at Bree Riders, using any tier 4 troops, like the Swan Knights. And I think you could probably even have better results if you had some more options. But this is pretty standard. If you're playing as a good faction, you're going to have these. Or if you're on a mixed server, you could obviously have these as well. But I'll show you the first attack we had here. This was a first try. Now, the gear I had on this Gandalf was different, so it's possible that the gear, I think I also had a few points allocated a little bit differently, but the gear was switched around, and here, as you can see, this was against Witch King, who did have the anti-stun, so I do think that can play a role here, and again, we're going to do some more of these when we can. This was the first result, so it was not very good. Again, it took the Witch King about down to half, so even still, like, Witch King probably wasn't going to take anybody else out at this strength, so this wasn't horrible, and at 46, I wasn't expecting a whole lot more. But I just did one more with those new items on Gandalf the White, and as you can see, Gandalf the White absolutely obliterated the Witch King. This was, out of all my testing, the first time where I actually beat the Witch King. This like knocked him out of the fort, and so this variation had the full helmet we were testing out with, so this did not have the stun immunity, so there can be some differences, and we're going to do some more testing. So again, keep an eye on the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet will be updated as we learn things about this, and I'll put notes in there if we maybe just constantly have a harder time against the stun immunity there. But again, Gandalf the White with the equal thirds of this, level 46, 4 levels different. Here it is again with the skills and the items. You can see just completely knocked out. Again, you can see the Witch King here had 5,300 alchemists. He had the dragoons. He had the halberd. I mean, obviously, this if you ran a little bit more of an anti-cav build, this might have a little bit more problems. But again, compared to my failure here, where I got knocked out, and that was a huge plus for me. So again, RNG is going to play a part in all of these counters. So some are going to be a little bit better. So we're going to continue testing as well. So stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you check out the spreadsheet. All those things can be updated. And if there are any major updates or new commanders, I may do a follow-up video looking at some additional counters or just like additional points on some of these counters that we've already covered. But again, I think Witch King's one of the most fantastic commanders in the game. I love using him. I've got him. He's like my favorite evil commander. but there's really something satisfying about putting him in his place with some tier 2 commanders. And again, as I am able to get my other commanders leveled up, you saw the reports of some tier 1 commanders like Dwalin also putting him in his place. So there's a lot of potential, even if you don't have Witch King, even if you're free to play. I think Gandalf the Grey is probably going to be the most free-to-play friendly counter for him, but I do think there's a lot of potential with a lot of these. So again, that is the video on how to counter the Witch King. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found some use from it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel because we're going to be doing more videos like this, like another requested video on how to counter Mumakil. That'll be coming up as soon as we can finish the discussions there. So stay tuned so you don't miss out on that, and I'll see you all in a future video.